Hi, so my lesson is focused on creating a holiday class book. And so the idea with this lesson would be this would be like kind of one day in this whole process of creating a class book. And so I'll get more into that later when I start talking about my lesson. But so for the grade that I have chosen is second grade, and so the kids would be about 7 to 8 years old. And this is my concept map. So in the middle, I have it focused on holidays, and then I broke it down into the categories of who celebrates them, when you celebrate, how you celebrate, and then the traditions. And so under each of those, I have, continued to narrow them down. Um, but I ended up focusing on how you celebrate as a whole, even though I did break it down more. Um, since we would be creating a book, I wanted students to be able to have as much information that they could provide as possible. And I felt like narrowing it down to just like the type of food that you have or the decorations that you put up to celebrate might be a little bit too narrow, especially for second graders and the amount of research that those students could conduct easily in the classroom. And then this is my activity map. And so I kind of started off the same way. I have the holidays, and then I have the who, the when, how, and the traditions. And then with each of those subcategories, I came up with one or two ideas um, of activities that you could do. So, for example, I have under the who, I have location, and so the students could create like kind of the holiday map, or they could travel to the holidays on like a walk around the classroom. And so I have it broken down with activities in those categories. And so for my activity, it will be a book, obviously, and so students will have to do some research to get to that point. So, my academic learning standard that I focused on is a Common Core State Standard of Literacy W2.2.7, which is to participate in shared research and writing projects. So, I really wanted this to be kind of a collaborative process for my students, and so I'm going to have them working in partners. Also, because depending on class sizes, I don't know if there would be enough holidays that could be easily researched for each student to have their own. So, depending on what class I would be doing this with, I would adapt the number of students working on the certain pages or certain holidays to two or three, depending on what I needed to make it work out. And then the art standards that I have are mostly for the visual arts. So I have to brainstorm collaboratively multiple approaches to an art or design problem. So because they would have to be working with at least a partner or maybe a group, they will have to collaborate and decide how they're going to create their not only their writing but also their illustration, which would need to be matching their writing. And then the illustrations are going to be based off of the culture that celebrates whatever holiday they have researched. And so they might have several different styles of art in that culture. And so the students are definitely going to have to figure out what's going to work best for them and how to execute that and collaborate for that. And then the second standard is to demonstrate safe procedures for using and cleaning art tools, equipment, and studio spaces. So students will be using different materials for their art based on the holiday that they have chosen, and so they will need to be responsible for, being safe with their materials and then, cleaning their stuff and putting it away as well. And then the last art standard that would for sure be included is to create works of art about events in home, school, or community life. So their art will be about a holiday, and it might not necessarily be local just to them, but it could be, it is still a work of art about events in the world. And then another one, this wouldn't be required, so I have it as a possibly kind of meeting that standard, um, could be perform appropriately for the audience and purpose, and that's a music art standard. And so students could potentially either perform and sing songs that are used to celebrate that holiday that they have chosen, or they could also potentially write a song about their holiday. Um, but that's not necessarily required in this lesson, so I didn't want to, put it in there for sure. But it is something that's possible. So now I have my kind of my lesson overview. I have my objective for just this day out of this whole um, kind of project that my class would be doing. So my objective for this day would be, after doing research, students will work with a partner to write about how the holiday is celebrated and create an illustration that goes with their writing. And I wanted to clarify too that the illustration doesn't just mean a drawing. It could also be 3D art that we could take a photograph of that could be put into the book later. Um, but for right now, it would be an illustration because they're just going to be brainstorming so they can draw what they want their picture or their art to look like, as well as, define some characteristics that they're going to make sure are included. And so, as I've said already, this lesson is in the middle of the process of creating a book about the different holidays as a whole class. And so this particular lesson would be taking place after the students have already completed their research on the holiday that they have chosen, and they're now getting their ideas out onto a graphic organizer for their writing and for their art. And so for this lesson, my hook would be to continue reading out of this book, which I would have, probably read a few pages out of before as another hook. And this book is really great. It's called What Do You Celebrate? Holidays and Festivals Around the World by Whitney Stewart. And so we would just, read some more pages out of that, and maybe the holidays would be that we read would be ones that students have already chosen for their assignment. It just kind of would depend. And then we would also just kind of touch back on what we have already completed. So that, should be their research. They should have already had their holiday picked. And this way we could kind of get, make sure everybody's all on the same page, if students missed a day or anything like that. And then for the actual teaching part of this lesson, I would use a document camera to show examples of cultural art, and then model how to fill out the graphic organizer, which I'll show you on the next slide. And so I would, make sure to show different types of art that kids, might not usually consider art, like tiles or things like that, and show both, 2D and 3D art, and really make sure to show the students like a wide variety so that they can see that like they have lots and lots of options and possibilities. And then I would make sure to model how I could brainstorm based on some of the examples that I showed, how to create and fill out my graphic organizer, and then also verbally explain the connection between the writing and the art, because these two pieces are crucial. They need to be matching. And so that is something that we will really, really be discussing as we are creating our book. And then I would also, show how we can decide on different aspects of the art that we want to include, and then come up with some more ideas for the artwork that we would have as our final draft. And so this is the graphic organizer that I created for this lesson specifically. And so I have it titled, Holiday Art Brainstorm. And so this is just, a quick place to write down ideas based on our research on the types of art that we're going to use. And so I want them to, look at the colors that are frequently used and maybe include those in their art. Have some information about the materials that they're using, what tools they use to create the art, and any special techniques. And so that way they can really be able to recreate the art of that culture. And then also I just included that little section for special notes if they had anything that was like, oh, I really want to include this in my art at the end. And then I have a section for them to write out like their complete idea, and they could also draw it in that section as well. And then they would also have just some lined paper, or maybe in their writing journals, they would be writing what they want to write about how the holiday is celebrated. And so we would make sure that they are working on them together at the same time and make sure that those are both aligned. And since this is just kind of in the middle of the lesson, there's not really a big closing activity, but it could be something as simple as just, working with their partner and making sure that their writing and their graphic organizers are lined up, or maybe crossing groups over so that they could check each other's work. And then for my reflection for integrating art into academics, I have wrote that, or written that integrating different forms of art better supports my teaching because it requires me to keep learning and trying new things. And then I will also have to be more creative myself and therefore be a better model of a creative person for my students. And then my teaching will also be able to reach more kids with all the different learning styles and provide a creative outlet for my students. And then for the second part, integrating arts with academics better supports students because it's able to reach several different learning styles. And it can help with recall and memorization, and it is just something that's fun to do. And students get to learn more by actually doing something hands-on with these integrated lessons. And so then they can also learn from different perspectives, which is my focus with this holiday lesson, to learn more about the culture and more about the holiday through the art, because that's a whole different lens that they can use. And so that's all for my presentation. So thanks for listening.